record on this meeting just so we can have it for posterity. And once that gets going, yes, I think that's going now. Go ahead.
So if you could tell me who you are, what's this UN club, what you would like to know, what do you know about the UN? I guess you know a lot. And what would be most interesting for you?
All right, well, I suppose I'll start. I'm the president of the Champlain College UNA, United Nations Association branch. This is the club's second year of running, so we're still very new. I personally have been interested in the UN since high school. I did several, Model United Nations conferences in high school, and I always find it very interesting to see how interconnected global issues are solved in international relations and how what give and take is done to make a solution happen and what factors lead into a solution maybe not working when it would work on paper and things like that. I'm also interested, particularly in the current circumstances, how COVID is certainly pushing us backwards in some ways. So that's certainly something I would love to hear about. I would also be very interested to hear about your work in Haiti with France as well. Some of your personal experiences with the UN would be really interesting for me to hear.
Good. And as most of you, all the others, you've done a lot of Model UN?
No, the UN's new to me. So, well, I know the basics of it. I'm not as into it as, say, Kelsey.
Good. So I tell you a bit about myself, and then I'll tell you what I'm doing here and the role of the UN. It's a good example because there are many roles for the UN in this country. So I've been in the UN for about 30 years. That's a long time, and I studied tropical agronomy, but in fact I've never practiced what I studied. And my first job abroad was when I was 22, and it was already in Haiti, and that was for an NGO. So this is if you are all young, so maybe you don't know those names or those period, but I arrived in Haiti 3 months before the departure of the last dictator of Haiti, who was called Baby Doc. Maybe you've heard about Baby Doc. So he was Jean-Claude Duvalier, and this is the end of, he left early 86. So I was there for 3 years, living in a village in the countryside. Then I went to, for the same NGO, I went to Ethiopia again for the last stretch of the last dictatorship in Ethiopia. This was the late 90s. And the dictator at the time was called Mengistu. So this was the end. This was right before the separation between Ethiopia and Eritrea. So that was the full-blown war between those two, at the time, not yet two countries. Then I joined the UN in Cambodia in '92, and Cambodia, the UN reopened in Cambodia in '91 after many years of interruption because of the Khmer Rouge event in the '70s, then the Vietnamese invasion in the '80s. So all that period, there was no UN. And when the UN re-entered, it was with a massive peacekeeping operation with 20,000 troops that stayed for a couple of years. And that's a bit of a unique history. It only happened a few times. The UN was administering the country. That was part of the peace agreement. So the same thing happened in Timor-Leste, and the same thing happened in Kosovo, when during a period of time you have UN administrators basically running ministries. So that was the case in Cambodia until the place started to settle. Then I moved to Palestine in the mid-90s. This was the first election of Bibi Netanyahu, and the first election of Yasser Arafat, the president of the PLO. He was elected. So this was right after the Oslo Accord, when the Palestinian Authority was established. Then I came back to Haiti for another 4 years in the late 90s. So that's already a return to Haiti. And then I went to New York. Then I went back to the field in Somalia, although at the time we were based in Kenya because we could not be based in Somalia at the time, but I was back and forth constantly to Somalia, and that was an absolutely fascinating experience. And it's also a big thing for the UN because of the history and because of all the dimension of the work of the UN in Somalia. Then I went for 10 years in New York, working on, I can talk about it, a lot of things, mostly linked to the link between peace and security, development and humanitarian work. And then I arrived here less than a year ago in Haiti for the third time. So voila, that's my history in terms of where I've been. In Haiti, so maybe to give a bit of perspective, so there was this dictatorship. Haiti has been a very unstable place since its birth. But there has been a period of stability mostly through dictatorship. So there has been a long stretch of dictatorship from the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. 40 years with a dad called Papa Doc and his son called Baby Doc. And then he left. And since then, there has been a lot of turmoils, a lot of instability. At the beginning, right when Duvalier left, there has been a series of military coups. And then there was the first democratic election post-dictatorship, and you must have heard that name of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, called Titide. So he was president-elect. He was, I would call that, he was coming from what was called the theology of liberation. So that was a bit of the left-wing side of the Catholic Church. The left-wing side of the Catholic Church. He was elected and immediately there was a coup, military coup. He had to leave Haiti. And then in 93, there was an agreement, political agreement signed in New York in what is called Governor's Island. Many, Lily and Lola, you know that place, Governor's Island. It's in Brooklyn. They signed, and then Aristide returned, and he returned in the same plane as Bill Clinton. So he was brought back to Haiti with Bill Clinton. That return in 93 coincided with the beginning of the huge UN engagement in Haiti since that period. So for 25 years, there has been a series of very big UN peacekeeping mission authorized by the Security Council to keep usually peacekeeping mission, they are deployed when you have conflict, when you have a war, when you have a peace process. In Haiti, it has been used because there isn't any other tool to keep the country with a bit of stability. So it's not the perfect tool because there is no war. There's no warring parties. It's just instability. So those peacekeeping missions stayed for 25 years, different size, sometimes 30,000 troops. But again, with no war to stop and no peace to keep. Only late last year, the Security Council decided to end the peacekeeping missions. So this is relevant because of the situation in Haiti, but it's also very much at the request of the US administration that was finding that those missions are very costly. They have made a review of all the peacekeeping mission across the world to cut them down. So in many countries there has been a cut down, and some of them have even been closed, I think. So since last year, the Security Council established in Haiti a small political office. That's another configuration. It's called BINU. So it's the office. So it's a French acronym. It's the Integrated Office, United Nations Office in Haiti. So one of my three functions, maybe when I describe the work of the UN, it also relates to my job here. I have three roles. So one of my job is to be the deputy to that mission. So the UN mission, they are headed by what is called a special representative of the Secretary General. So she's an American diplomat, a former American diplomat. and I'm the deputy to that mission. What that mission does, it's mostly political work, good offices to advance national dialogue, because there is a lot of, it's a very polarized political situation. So making space for actors, political actors to dialogue and find consensus. We carry out some of the legacy of the previous peacekeeping mission on rule of law, security, human rights, working with corrections, prisons. So we have still a bit of capacity to do that work. And also work on what we call community violence reduction. Haiti is really affected by gang violence. It's really a recent but a very terrible phenomenon. So gang violence, a bit like in some countries in Central America. So we are doing work to try to reduce what we call community violence. So that's one part of the work of the UN, it's the political work. Then the bulk of the work the UN has to do, because a lot of Haiti's problems are linked to lack of development. So it's the work the UN does on development. So that's my second hat. That's my biggest hat. I am the coordinator of the UN development work. There are 18 UN agencies, 18, working in Haiti, most of them on development. So you are familiar with many of those acronyms. One just got the Nobel Peace Prize 3 days ago, WFP. So the World Food Program, they are big here. You have UNICEF, you have UN Women, you have UNDP, that was my parent organization for 29 years, the UN Development Program, you have UNESCO, you have the ILO, the International Labour Organization, you have UNAIDS, you have UNEP for environment, you have 18 of them. It's a big family. So it's a lot of work to coordinate the family, to make sure it is focused, to make sure it's focusing on key issues, key what I call the development deficits of the country. So we are having a lot of things ongoing to try to address some of those difficult issues of poverty, of disasters, of education, you name it. And then the third job is in Haiti, because of this, what I call those development deficits, there are a lot of humanitarian needs, chronic. Most of them are chronic, so they are not due to a sudden drought or, so most of them are chronic, but they are also the usual shock. So the earthquake in 2010 is the biggest one. It killed over 130,000 people, but regularly we have hurricanes. So far this year we've been lucky, but hurricanes, Haiti is a country that does not mitigate its risk very well. So contrary to its neighbors, for example, I like to say that the same hurricane that will pass through the Dominican Republic, then Haiti, and then Cuba will kill maybe 500 people, 10,000 people, and 100 people. Yeah, so Dominican Republic is well prepared. The constructions are well done, and so on and so on. Haiti is ill prepared, and Cuba is super prepared, and it's the same hurricane. So this creates usually a lot of frenzy, a lot of humanitarian needs, and huge responses. You need Canadian. Usually, when there are big events like this in Haiti, you have the U.S. military, the Canadian military, the French military, and so on coming, and the UN all over the place. So that's it. Maybe I say a few words on COVID, because it has impacted. It's impacting you. It's impacting everybody. For Haiti, we were. I was using a lot the term. We have to prepare for a perfect storm, because the country is so fragile. And we had done some simulation with Oxford and with Cornell in terms of simulation of scenarios, and the scenarios, even the best scenario was absolutely dramatic in terms of number of affected and number of deaths. 10 of thousands of people would die and so on. But in fact, almost none of that happened. None of that happened. And now we talk about the Haitian miracle. The Caribbean, the American region, the Americas and the Caribbean are really, really badly affected. And in the middle of that, you have Haiti. That is officially, the official numbers are wrong, but even if we take even if we multiply them by 10, still there's been officially 250 deaths, which is 1/3 or 1/4 of what there is currently in the US. So we still don't know why. It's hard to understand. We are doing 2 studies. It's called, maybe you might have heard in other countries they do that. It's called a seroprevalence study. So you do a study, you sample and you see how many people have been affected. It's how we found out that, for example, in the slums in Mumbai, in India, 50% of the people have had COVID. So maybe we will find that the virus has really circulated a lot, and then people live a lot in the open. There might be a number of reasons that would explain why it has been so mild. But it had a big impact on what we call the non-COVID health. So this has been the main impact, non-COVID health, for a number of reasons. First, when we thought it would be very bad, many health services functioned less, or they closed down, or there was no protocol to protect against COVID the regular health system. So there were technical reasons, but also there has been a lot of rumors in Haiti. The rumor mill functioned 100%. So there is still the rumor that if you go to a hospital right now, they will inject you something. They will inject you something for COVID. So people simply didn't go there. So it had really massive implication on the vaccination rate, on neonatal mother consultation before birth, in birth in hospital. So the rate of maternal mortality has really increased, and then the impact on other pathologies like malaria, tuberculosis, and even HIV, because people either they didn't go for testing or they didn't go and take their treatment. So that has been the main thing. That's what we do. That's what we do. I don't know how much you know Haiti. It's more, I don't know if you know that book. There was a book maybe in the 80s that is called The Shock of Civilization, The Clash of Civilization. It was super famous at the time. It's a geopolitical book. It was very, very well known. And the author managed to group all the countries in the world in geopolitical groups. And so you have the Buddhist part of the world, you have the South Europe, you have the Sahel. So you have the big region. He was able to assemble all the countries in the world in groups that have a lot of things in common. He could not put 3 countries in any group. One is Japan, because Japan has a unique history. One was Ethiopia, because Ethiopia does not consider itself as part of Africa nor the Arab world. And then there was Haiti, because Haiti has a unique history and is in the middle of the Caribbean with unique features compared to its neighbors. Different language, different history, different culture. It was the first black independent republic in 1804. So if you read the story of this country, it's absolutely unique. That's why it's not really well integrated in the region. And just to give you an example, after the dramatic earthquake in 2010, the country that really made, so many countries came to help Haiti with money, with expertise, and so on. The country that made a unique offer to Haiti is a country, because Haiti is most of the people of Haiti have their roots in West Africa. So it's the Senegal. Senegal basically offered to any Haitian wanting to resettle in Senegal, they would be given land or students could study for free. And last week, for example, I recruited in my office a young chap. He was just returning from Senegal, having passed his master there. Voila, I've spoken too much. This is what I do.
No problem. That was really informative. If anybody has questions, I know the Zoom has a feature where you can push a button. If you look at the participants list, there should be a button that says raise hand. So if anybody has any questions, go ahead and hit that button so we can kind of gauge it from there. If you open up participants. Yeah, Taylor, you got it.
And I guess maybe some of you want to join the UN. We can talk about that.
Yeah, that would actually be something great if you want to talk about. I was gonna ask just another COVID question about. So what are they completely? Did they completely lock down? Are they locked down? How did they handle it? I guess maybe not in comparison to other countries, but how did they? What was the procedures they put into place?
So what was good about Haiti is that, well, it's one good out of one bad. Because of all this instability and so on, bad security, currently for several years now, there is basically no tourists coming to Haiti. So so that was a big factor in terms of COVID coming in slowly inside the country, because many like the Dominican Republic, on the other side of the island, that's a total tourist country. They got very badly hit, and most of that came through tourists. So we had a very slow start. Then what happened is that there is 500,000 Haitian working in the Dominican Republic, and because of the slowdown of the economy, 200,000 came back, and some of them with COVID. So this is when it started. The day the first case was detected on the 19th of March, together with the director of the World Health Organization, we were called by the president in early afternoon, and we didn't know that the first case had been detected, but he wanted our advice. So we spoke for 1 hour, and then in the evening he declared that the first case had been detected, and he was declaring a state of emergency, and they published the first long list of measures. Many of them, they remain just on paper, because, for example, it's impossible in a country like Haiti to ask people to stay in confinement. You have millions of people living in slums. You have millions of people, they don't know what tomorrow will be made of. They have $5 in their pocket maybe, and that's it. They have to work, they have to go, they have to do informal business, trade, and so on. So it was impossible, but the strict measures they took, and that were really enforced for several months, total closure of the border with the Dominican Republic, at least the legal checkpoints, total closure of the airport, which means for months we couldn't leave. They closed, there is a big textile industry with 50,000 workers. They closed them down for several months. So all that helped. Where we are right now, everything has been reopened. The schools have reopened, the borders have reopened, most flights have reopened. We don't talk about second wave because there was not really a first wave. Also, something I should have mentioned that might explain also why we've done good is that I'm sure you heard about the fact that 10 years ago, next week is the 10th anniversary of the arrival in cholera in Haiti. Through, I'm sure you heard about that, through the UN. So because of that, with UN support, the government of Haiti has put in place a very efficient system of detection, surveillance, detection, and tracing. That was for cholera. The minute someone was reported with symptoms, immediately sample is taken, and the contact also tested. So this was used for COVID very efficiently. Stefan.
Go ahead, Stephen.
Yeah, sorry. Thanks for the presentation. I actually had two questions, And one is a nice follow-up to Taylor's question about, I saw your quote in the New York Times back in May about how you expect to have a reverse flow of population because people can't make money in Haiti right now because of the economy crash. However, the Dominican Republic is not really letting people back in since their cases have decreased of COVID and Haiti's have increased since they had to leave the DR to go back to Haiti. So how is the UN handling international relations with the DR with respect to border crossing becoming more severe with respect to security?
You said two.
Oh yes, and the second one is not about COVID. It's about you mentioned that I also saw in your article or the article where you were quoted that what is my train of thought? Yes. So people didn't go to hospitals because of this rumor that you would be injected or whatnot. So people who are symptomatic were discouraged to go to hospitals or medical centers. So in your opinion, what do you think is the epicenter of this misinformation dissemination?
Okay, on the Dominican Republic, well, it's a complicated history between the two countries. It's up and down, a lot of mistrust, a lot of, and if you read the history, it's an history of invasion. Yeah, each country invaded the other several times and so on. So it's a lot of mistrust, different culture, different history. And right now, really, a few decades ago, they were basically at par economically. And then suddenly, the Dominican Republic just started booming. So now they are many fold ahead of Haiti economically. So there is always this attraction for, and most of the migration is a irregular migration. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how the UN is involved? We are involved in, well, during COVID, we've been very involved with to make sure the two governments were talking. So we had a number of VTCs with the UN between the two governments, the two ministries to exchange information, for the two scientific scientific committee to talk to each other. So we've been very involved with that, and we've been very involved on the Haitian side on setting up, at least in the official border crossing, because there are 4 official border crossing and at least 96 illegal, where people just come and go. But in where most people cross in the official border crossing, we've put testing, temperature testing, taking phone numbers, making isolation wards for people. I'm not saying it worked perfectly, because people, they come and if they know they have something, they will run away.
Definitely, yeah.
But beyond COVID, what we are trying to do, including now, and every day right now I'm busy with that, there has been recently elections in the Dominican Republic. They've taken office in August with very good narrative vis-a-vis Haiti, very fresh and positive, and so it more than the previous regime. Yeah. So it's yet again opportunity for more constructive dialogue, and the UN, because we are on both sides, we are talking how we can facilitate dialogue on either on certain themes, like themes that speak to both sides of the island, like disaster management or pandemics or trade, or so we have a list of topics where we want to offer our service.
Mm-hmm.
Or also to bring groups together, women, youth, mayors, chambers of commerce. So that's the role we play. There is also human rights, so we have a human rights office here. There are also involvement by our human rights colleague when there are deportation. There are deportation in Haiti from the Dominican Republic, but also from the US, from the Bahamas, from many islands, because Haitian migrants are really, they go on a boat and they go to sea. Last week they arrested the boat on the shore of Colombia. Many Haitians are now joining the caravans through Central America to cross to the US. Yeah.
Yeah.
Many Haitian are going to all the Caribbean. Many Haitian are going to Brazil. Many Haitian are in Chile. It's really a big outflow of people. On the hospital, I don't know where the epicenter is. One thing I think we should have done better, and we've tried, but we didn't succeed. I wanted us to connect with a specialized group, including in the US. There are some of those groups who work on how do you call that, behavior change, and they can track the origin of rumors. Well, they assess where is the rumor coming from, why is this rumor spreading, and then how to combat this rumor.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Sandy Pentland of MIT is, I think he's leading a lot of projects in misinformation tracking.
Yeah. So in Haiti, from day one, in Haiti, there is a lot of popular justice. Yeah. So a lot of time, people they will basically, if they catch someone stealing something, they can lynch or kill the person. Yeah?
Oh wow.
So around COVID, when COVID started, and it has happened before with other things, there was a lot of stigmatization. So the first cases of COVID, or the first noise that someone would have, there has been stigmatization of people. So people had to be given protection. The first COVID structure we helped put in place, a facility, the hospital ward, and so on. When those rumors started spreading, several of them were destroyed or burned. Yeah, because COVID should not come to our villages or our cities. So there were attacks against suspected people. I don't think anyone died, but often the police had to give shelter to those people.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw a similar thing in the U.S. with when the coronavirus first started to spread across the world. In the U.S., there was a large stigma against people of Asian descent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
What else?
If anyone else has a question, go ahead and raise your hand in the little participants list. If not, I have a couple of questions, but of course, if anyone else has questions, I'd rather they go first.
I guess I'll go. That's okay. Bruno, I was wondering, with COVID, what has been like one of the big challenges, I guess, like you've faced being in Haiti, like whether it be like in your day-to-day work life, like interacting with coworkers, or whether it be traveling back to France or to the US. And like most challenging, I guess, since COVID's happened.
So in the UN, there is something we call duty of care. So duty of care is how do you care? So this is about the UN workers. It's not about the country. It's about how do you take care of your own personnel, all the staff. So in Haiti, we have about 1,500 UN personnel, international and Haitian colleagues, plus all what we call the dependents, or the families. Yeah? So in total, it's about 6,000 people we need to take care of. So duty of care, that means if they are sick, if they need to be evacuated, if they need to be protected, and so on. And then, so that's one. Then across the world, every country, the UN is everywhere. So in every country, we have the checklist of how well we were doing on duty of care. Do you have good medical facility in the country? Do you have good hospital? Do you have, if somebody needs to be medically evacuated, do you have a place to go? Do you have a system for medical evacuation? So all that, there was a checklist of things. And Haiti was, I assume, among the 5 at the bottom. Yeah? At the bottom, we were at the very, very, very bottom. I assume with places like Chad. So we were in the category of the worst, very poorly equipped. because the national system, the health system is very deficient. Even the private clinics, the few private clinics that are here that are quite good, they did not want to engage onto anything related to COVID. They say no to COVID. The Dominican Republic, which outside of COVID, it's the country where we would medically evacuate people by plane. If there are security issues, it's what we call our safe haven and so on. But the Dominican Republic closed everything. So we lost everything from one day to the next. So for several months, we were really in a very bad position. If someone would have fallen really sick, we would not have known basically what to do with this person. And then suddenly, and then for flights, you ask about travel. There was no travel possible between March and July. No way to escape, except like in many countries, there were what they call repatriation flights. That means maybe there have been 15 flights from, for example, from the US coming. They would come empty, and they would be full of US residents to take them out of the country. So there were Canadian flights, there were a few European flights, so we were able to put a few UN people in those flights. And then finally, the UN did a lot of attempts to find a country that would serve as what we call they did that in all the regions of the world. One country in each continent agreeing to become the medical evacuation point for that continent, for UN personnel. So in the Americas, finally, Costa Rica was the volunteer to offer its services, and one of the best hospitals in Central America. So now if we have a patient with a severe COVID syndrome, this person is flown to Costa Rica, and we did that twice already. So since then, since July, the airport has reopened, so we can fly again. And then we have Costa Rica, so now we're good. And then in terms of office, most of the offices have been closed. The UN offices, we have plenty of offices. So people were working from home. And then only now, 2 weeks ago, we gave the authorization to start reopening offices, with no more than 1/3 of the personnel so they have to do rotation. I guess like in university in the US. Yeah. But we've been lucky. Nobody was in the UN, nobody was severely affected. Yeah.
Could you you said it a little bit earlier, could you talk a little bit more about getting involved with the UN in general, and you specifically? I remember you were talking about how you started out with NGOs and then then slowly made the move to working with the UN specifically. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
For me, I'm a very bad example, because what happened to me will never happen to you. And I've never met one person who had that story. So, and I still don't believe it happened. So I worked in an NGO in Haiti and Ethiopia. Then I went back to France to finish my degree. So I went back to school, and then I had a final internship. So I went back with another NGO, a French NGO, to Cambodia for 6 months. And the week before leaving to Cambodia for that NGO, someone called me at 8 in the evening, someone I didn't know. And that person was calling from the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And her first sentence is, "Do you want to work with the UN?" That's it. So that's my story. I never asked anything. So the backstory is that this NGO, like you have many US think tanks, it's the revolving door. People, they work for the administration, then they work for a think tank, then they come back to the administration. So this NGO had been created by former officials from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so they knew each other. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wanted to place what we call young professional, three young professionals, one in Vietnam, one in Laos, and one in Cambodia. So they had called, the ministry had called the director of this NGO, knowing to ask if he would know anyone who could be interested. So they gave my name and they called me. And the day after, I went to Paris for an interview with the UN, and it worked. Then I went for 6 months for this internship, and straight from there, I went to that. I joined the UN. So that's one way to join the UN. This is called GPO. There are, I'm not sure. Maybe there is no. I've never met an American GPO. It's a junior professional officer. I am not sure the US has that. Many European countries, like they would pay for 50 GPO across the UN, yeah? 5 with peacekeeping and 10 with development. And Japan, a lot of the Japanese, Japan, the Nordics, and then the rate of retention usually is high because many people who start as a GPO, they like working with the UN, so they stay. So I'm one of those, but I'm a lucky one because I never asked to join the UN. So that's one way to enter. One good way to enter is what's called the UN volunteers. I don't know if you heard about them. So UNV, that's many people they start as a UN volunteer. So you just have to, I think you need to finish your study, you have to have a bit of experience, and then you just enroll. So that's a good way. And maybe the first thing they will say, okay, there are elections in the Congo, and we need 500 electoral observers, and many of them would be volunteers. So you go for a month, but at least you've put. When people ask me how do you get into the UN, I say you have to catch whatever, you have to catch something, and then you pull it. Yeah. One way also, I found many people, the way they enter into the UN, you work, for example, for an NGO, usually for an NGO. You work in a country, for example, you arrive, let's say you have studied something around migration, and you work in Niger. Yeah, you work in Niger for an NGO around migration, and you stay 6 months, you stay 1 year, you stay 1 year and a half, and then you know the place, you know the context, you know the people, you have your contacts, and you start speaking the language. And there is always a UN agency that will look for someone, even if it's for a month or 2 months. They always look for consultancies, and then you apply, you get it, and then you get to know the people, and then from one job you get to. I know many people. It's how they entered into the UN, by not by applying from afar, but from being there, getting to know people, having an experience, and then you join. So that's a good way also.
Do you tend to find, in your experience with people who've joined the UN in this way, that people who've studied a particular topic tend to join the UN, or is it sort of all over the map?
Yeah, all over the map. Many people in the UN, they have a background is in foreign relation, in development studies, and in economics. I think the bulk, and law. That's the bulk. That's the majority. And then in the specialized agency, that's where you have people who are really about one profession. So in the World Health Organization, it's full of epidemiologists and doctors. But the bulk of the UN, the peacekeeping, the political work, the human rights, all of that, which is very much at the heart of what we do, it's foreign relation, law studies, yeah. But it's a bit, there is a bit of everything. There's a bit of everything. Me, I'm an agronomist. I never practiced agronomy. I have dealt with all kind of things. I've done election, I've done constitution work, I've done human rights, but you learn by doing.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you, Bruno, for taking the time to speak with us. I really appreciate it. So my question is in regards to our man in Washington right now. how much does he involve himself in UN operations? I guess in particular in Haiti, and what do we think, or what does the UN think about him winning like the election, and how that will interact with what you do?
So I won't comment on that. That's not my role nor my place. But I can, speaking from Haiti, I can tell that the US policy on Haiti has been relatively constant, whatever the administration was in Washington, for the past 25, 30 years. It's mostly a policy of containment. And it started under President Carter. That means we contain Haiti, the place that has deep problem. They are hard to fix. Maybe they cannot be fixed by foreign interference. So let's contain. And usually the containment has been about migration flows to the US and drugs trafficking. So you can read whichever administration it has been the policy. It is now largely the policy. It was the case under Obama and so on. Yeah. So for that country, not much has changed. Now, in terms of you read the newspaper as much as I do, then you see positions that have been taken with some parts of the UN that deals with some topics, including in terms of US investment in some agencies. So it happened to UNESCO a few years ago. Yeah, when the US pulled out of UNESCO, the US pulled out of the Human Rights Council, the US is threatening to pull from WHO, but you read the newspaper as well as I do. So. The good thing with the UN, we are a member state organization. So the US is the biggest member state in terms of its contribution to the UN budget, but there are another 122.
Thank you.
You have a big house. This is not the dorm.
Yeah, I'm over at a friend's house right now.
I had two questions. One was about dictatorship in Haiti. You were saying that Haiti's been kind of an unstable country pretty much since the beginning, but it did find some stability in dictatorship, which doesn't surprise me because, you know, it's pretty easy to control things when you control everything. But as I understand it, the Security Council does approve, or at least has approved, democracy in the past as an inherent protection of peace and security globally. So I'm wondering, and you were saying there was quite a bit of turmoil from the move to dictatorship to democracy, which, you know, also doesn't surprise me because that is a big change. I'm wondering kind of what that looks like going forward as Haiti becomes a democratic nation, but also at the same time, in a way, with community-based violence and things like that going on, also a more unstable country in that way. And then my second question was, would you say that France, it kind of goes off of Isaac's question in the US sense to more of a France policy. Would you say that France has had a greater interest in Haiti due to its colonial past with Haiti and its having that connection?
So, you know, when you visit countries that have lived under dictatorship, I guess, I don't know exactly the numbers I should put, but if you go there 1 year after the fall of a dictatorship, it's absolute happiness. Yeah. If you go 5 years after, it's still okay. If you go 20 years or 30 years after, I'm not saying in all countries that went through dictatorship, but in many, including in countries in Africa that were under very strong dictatorship, and then there was opening. You will hear a lot about it was better that time. Yeah, because one generation has passed, people don't remember. People here in Haiti, they don't remember that there was a place called Fort Dimanche. Fort Dimanche in English would be Fortress Sunday. That was the torture place, the torture. People who would go to that fortress, they would not come alive. Yeah? But now when you speak to people, including old people who they remember what they remember from that time in the good old days. The good old days. You could walk against the Malecon by the sea. You could walk there. On Sunday, people would go and walk there. Now you cannot, as UN staff, but as most Haitian would, you cannot go there. You cannot. It's gang infested. Yeah? It's gang territory. They will remember that there was a civic service at the time. Each civil servant, before joining the civil service, you had to do 2 years of civic service in the countryside. So they remember those things, a lot of those things. Because dictatorship, usually they bring security. They bring security. There was in Haiti at the time of Duvalier, I don't know if you heard that there was this militia. One person out of 8 at the time was associated one way or the other with this militia. It was called the Tonton Macoute. I don't know if any of you have heard Tonton Macoute. It was everywhere. When I first went to Haiti, Tonton Macoute was still there. Every single hill at Tonton Macoute. So that's the local security system, basically. It's the eyes and ears of the regime, but also local security. So when you go to dictatorship, if it's not well managed, if it's not well transitioned, if it's and then democracy is not only election. Democracy is about culture. It's a culture, and sometimes Western democracy they push, including in Haiti, they push for election. You need election. You need an election, but election for the sake of election doesn't bring. You need a culture of democracy, you need a culture of peace, you need a culture of political dialogue, you need all that. Many of those things Haiti doesn't have. And also what happened in Haiti that explain also the turmoil is that they rushed, so Duvalier left in 86, they rushed in 87 to draft a new constitution. And the motto for that constitution was never again a dictator. So the process was rushed and the process was done in an emotional moment. And they took very nice part of constitution from different countries. So they took nice part and they put them together and they didn't really check whether the constitution would work. And then they locked the constitution in such a way that return to dictatorship would not be possible. So they have a constitution that cannot be amended. You need two-thirds of the 2 legislative chambers majority over 2 terms. That's complicated. 2/3 of 2 chambers over 2 terms. That means over 10 years. So it's impossible to change the constitution, except if you have a revolution or if you have a national political consensus. So it's messy. It's messy. The transition, yeah, when it's too rushed, when it's not ready, when it's not well, and there is a lot of emotion after dictatorship. Yeah. So Haiti, I don't know, it's not for me to judge, but we're still paying the price here. On France's interest in Haiti, well, a bit of economic interest, not much, but a little bit. A lot of emotional and cultural link. The language, it's part of it's a pillar of francophonie in the Americas, yeah, with Quebec. So Quebec and Haiti. Politically, they are involved, but the big foreign political weight is where you sit. Yeah. It's the US. Yeah. But still, a lot of French people live in Haiti. There is a big Haitian diaspora, much smaller than in the US or in Canada, but still a big French diaspora in Haiti. And the culture, really the culture, the literature. Haiti is a country that has an incredibly rich culture. Yeah? It's the art scene is incredible. the literature. There is an incredible number of writers, painters. It's famous for that. Today in Montreal, they inaugurated a statue of one of the most famous. He lives in Montreal. One of the most famous Haitian writer, and is a member of the French Literature Academy also.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions before we about wrap up? We've just about reached the hour.
So I hope many of you will join the UN. At least we'll try. Yeah. I'll show you my little flag. You see, this is the UN.
It's upside down.
Upside down, yes.
All right.
Okay, guys.
Taylor, did you
Thank
have a
you.
question before we duck out?
No, I was going to say thank you for introducing me to the world of the UN. It's
Yep.
definitely very interesting.
Thank you all. Be safe. Be safe. Be safe.
You as well.
Yeah.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much for taking the time to speak with us.
Yep. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You as well.
Bye bye.